All right. Well, we will just get started with our first question here. And the first question is, what do you think is the biggest misconception you might have about a dog's behavior? And that's kind of a hard one.
Biggest misconception that somebody might have about a dog's behavior, that's, I would say, is probably humanizing the dog. That's very, very typical of a lot of people.
That is.
So what happens is the dog will behave a certain way, and it is often our tendency to, to assign some sort of human emotion behind it.
Got you.
So we'll say things like, he's doing it to get back at me. That's a common one that you hear. Or he's doing it because he is jealous, or he's doing it because he knows what he's doing. Something along those lines. So that I find is the most common misconception about a dog's behavior is we don't see it from a dog's perspective because it's not natural for us. We're humans, so we tend to see things through human eyes. And although it is helpful sometimes to do that, a lot of times we just go a little bit too far.
Okay. I know my daughter reminds me that, dogs weren't designed to be pets.
Exactly.
We
You know.
have domesticated them.
Yeah,
It says
they're animals.
same thing with cats. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so our next question here is, how would you suggest I approach training my dog if it has a history of trauma or abuse? And that's something that we see come in for some of the rescues we get come in just happy as can be. But
Confident.
there's
Yeah.
some we come in that it's like, okay, there's a trauma, there's some abuse, there's this
Yeah.
dog is not coming from the sweetest environment.
I've worked with a lot of very sensitive dogs. I've worked with dogs that had high anxiety, very, very timid dogs, and sometimes we don't know what the extent of the abuse was. We have no idea. Sometimes we know exactly. Sometimes you get a dog through a set of circumstances where the dog physically went through some abuse and harsh treatment and gross neglect. And what I've found, my personal um, perspective on this, is that the best way to approach that is to leave it behind and just carry on as best as we can. I know it's a broad answer. Also, it's a bit of a broad question too, because
It is.
the extent of abuse for one animal might be different than another animal, right? And also, how this particular animal perceive that abuse would be different to how another animal will perceive the same type of treatment, because the temperament will be a huge factor as to how they perceive that. So when I noticed that, we go, hey, look, I know life was hard, and I know, you're terrified of men, you're terrified of X, Y, and Z because you had a really bad experience with X, Y, and Z. The best thing to do is to not necessarily avoid X, Y, and Z. If it's something we cannot avoid, we're not even going to try to avoid it. Maybe we're going to set you up for success, but we're going to pretend like it never even happened. You know what I mean? We're going to pretend like it was never a thing, and we're just going to carry on. We're going to just move forward. We're going to move past it. It is uncomfortable, but you have to push through. And I've found that doing it that way, it, it gives the whole situation an air of dignity that a lot of times we don't think about, because our human tendency is to want to care. You know what I mean? Like, we see something that didn't go through the most fair treatment, and we want to just do our best to overcompensate. But in more often than not, the best option is to go, let's just move past it. Let's pretend like it never even happened, and we're going to, we're just gonna, keep moving. For instance, if like a dog hypothetically was abused by men, right? If that generally happened and we actually have evidence, we know that it happened, and the dog, let's say, got really, really awful treatment by maybe one or two men in its life. Now you see the dog change the environments, and now you see the dog is flinching every time it sees a guy. Well, rather than try to make a big deal out of it, we set the dog up for success. We go, hey, look, when men are here, good things happen, right? However, if the dog goes, I don't even care, I just don't want to see men, period, we don't delete men from the equation. We don't go, okay, from now on, you're never going to see men because you don't like men. We're going to go, men are just here, and they have nothing to do with you.
Got you.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
Rather than making a big deal out of it.
You're kind of reintroducing.
Yeah, like for instance, and I know that's a bit of a broad answer, but there's so many specifics that go into it. Then what we would do is we'll go, guess what, Fido? I live here too. I'm going to go to the kitchen. I'm not going to look at you. But we're not going to dance around it.
Gotcha.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
It's almost like you let the dog know, in a way,
it's my house.
Like you're going, you need to get over it. Mm-hmm. We're not going to shove you in the arms of a man. You see what I mean?
No,
we're not going to force you, but at the same time, we're almost going, get over it. You're a lot tougher than you think you are. We gotta move on. And I've found that in many instances, that is often much more effective because a lot of dogs just need that extra shove, just like a lot of people. I could be terrified of something, and you had children, you probably dealt with this, when your children are kind of nervous about something, like, I don't want to climb the tree, and you go, get your ass up that tree, right? Get over it, climb up. And then when they do it, they're like, whoa, that was really cool. Mm-hmm. Like they just needed that extra shove. They needed that, that caring but firm push. And once they do it, they go, oh, that wasn't too bad. So I find that a lot of times that is the case with dogs, but we're so caring as humans, especially if we're dog people and we like dogs. We're so caring that we don't even want to go there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. The next question we have is, what's one piece of advice you can give me to make sure I'm starting training on the right foot? And I know that is a loose question.
So one piece of advice to make sure that training is starting on the right foot would be, depending on the situation, there's a broad spectrum of what kind of training, what kind of dog we have. But if we have more of a young, green, sort of a blank slate, the best option would be patience and focus on pleasant associations, because you have a young dog, you have a young mind, you have a green dog, you have a blank slate, blank canvas.
Pleasant associations.
Pleasant associations. You want the dog to know, look, good things are going to happen out of this relationship. Training is good. Training is fun for you. If you have a dog on the opposite end of that spectrum, where you don't have a blank canvas, you don't have a clean slate, you don't have a green dog, you have a very set in his ways dog, you have a very mature dog, you have a very determined dog, then the focus in the beginning might be, look, here are the rules. These are the rules we have to follow. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so we're going from a fresh dog, doesn't know any better, to you've got a dog from the pound. And
that is an adult.
It's an adult dog, 3 or 4 years old.
And very determined. Like you get him, you adopt him, or you foster him, and he's already raising hell. Mm-hmm. He's already bouncing off the walls, bolting through the door. You have, in that instance, you have to go, because that dog is a little bit more prone to going, I have all the pleasant associations that I've already made in my last 5 years of life. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
The dog might be like, I already know what I like. And you're not one of those things.
So the dog is like, I already had the playbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is. So in that instance, in that end of the spectrum, you go, okay, these are my rules. I know you don't understand the rules, but I'm going to help you understand these rules. And these are things that we don't do. These are things that we can do, and these are things that we do together. And these are things that under no circumstances we even think about.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Well, I stacked this next question underneath this one because I figured it would run in together with your answer. But, what should I do if my dog isn't responding to the training techniques I've been using?
Those not responding to the training techniques that you're using, reassess. Try to look back and see what it could be. So is it A, that the dog is just not motivated by what you're motivating it with? If there is no motivation.
And I guess you should say, what is working? And
that's a really good question.
Yeah, what if something is working, what?
So what is the definition of how do we know it's working or it's not working, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, yes. I could see that if you're training a dog and you got this is not working, I guess one question I might ask myself is, well, if I'm working on training, this isn't working, but this worked and this worked. Well, what did I do different?
Yeah.
In communicating.
So there are maybe a few things that you can always look at in your training protocol, in your training journey, where you can go, where are these three things fitting in and where am I lacking? So those three things are consistency, timing, and motivation. So if the dog is not motivated by what I have, by what I'm providing, then the dog basically goes, I have no need or no desire to do those things. If my motivation is great, meaning, okay, I have a desire to do those things, right, for you, because there is something that is motivating me, if that's on point, but my timing is off, then that will also affect the training progression. Do you see what I mean? So, hey, you did a good thing, and I have something really good for you, but the timing between when you did it and when I deliver that reward is so off that you didn't even make an association to that.
Got you.
So if my timing is way off, but my motivation is great, the dog will not make that connection.
Well, that just ties in with trying to train a toddler.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much. Very similar.
Yeah, your timing is.
Yeah. Now, then you have consistency, meaning, okay, if my motivation is on point, my timing is on point, but I'm not consistent, then the training is not going to go anywhere. Because that means, just like we touched on last week, if sometimes this happens, but sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't, there isn't enough of a pattern for the dog to make that connection. So if my training is not working, and what working means is there should be sort of a linear progression. You know what I mean? There should be some sort of some measurable progress. It doesn't have to be amazing, but I should see some progress where I can go, okay, it's a little bit better than it was last week. It's a little bit better than it was 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Okay, if the answer is it's not better, it's worse, or it's the same, or it's only a fraction better, but it's been a really long time, then something in these three equations, some aspect in this equation, one of these three things is off. Maybe the dog is just not motivated enough. Maybe my timing is off, or maybe I'm just not being consistent. So there's those three things: timing, consistency, motivation. You tweak those things, and you should see progress.
Okay. So our next question is in regards to an adult dog. Mm-hmm. What should I do if my adult dog continues to have accidents in the house despite following a strict potty schedule?
That is a good question, and it's a bit of a broad and multifaceted question. So you have a specific?
Well, in my particular case, I have an older dog that I know as the weather changes, it is harder for mobility. So in some ways, Regina and I cut it some slack.
Yeah.
Because we were like, okay, your arthritis has kicked in.
Yeah.
there's this is going on, and although you do go outside, we do take you to the bathroom, you do go to the bathroom outside, mornings and evenings can be very tough.
Of course.
The joints kick in and some stuff. And so, and not to hijack your answer.
No, that's
but
good.
That is an instance that we have run into with one of our adult dogs. It's just, we call it the change of life for that dog.
You have a special needs dog in that instance.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So when you have a special needs dog, you have to make accommodations that you normally wouldn't if you had a healthy young dog. So in that instance, it's more of a very specific issue that you have. You found the best way to address it. The best way to deal with it is we're gonna cut you some slack, and maybe we're gonna make some preparations. So in your case, maybe like an indoor potty area we talked about before. So get some sod or some turf. Put it in some area of your house where you let the older dog know, hey, when it's raining, you're not feeling well, you don't have to go outside. Just go to this little potty area that we made for you. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And that's a very specific instance. If I have an adult dog that doesn't have those special conditions and it's still having accidents, my first thought is to take him to the vet. Because we could be dealing with a UTI.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We could be dealing with a UTI and not even be aware of it. Sometimes it's not actually a UTI. I've experienced this with dogs before. Sometimes it's not a UTI. Sometimes it's, and I also want to reemphasize, I'm not a veterinarian. This is just off my experience. What I've also noticed is certain dog foods, especially if it's dry food, certain dog foods have such a high sodium content that what happens is it'll make him urinate way more often. It's like the water just somehow gets produced out of their system. But when I've noticed that when I've switched them to a lower sodium food, that doesn't happen as often. So a lot of times it is something that can easily go unrecognized if you're not aware of it, unless you experience it. And I've experienced this, where I've given a certain dog healthy, no UTIs, nothing, a certain food, and do one of two things. It make the dog ravenously thirsty, just crazy thirsty, so they want to guzzle a bunch of water. That obviously makes him urinate more often. Or the other thing that it would do is, even if I would limit the water, I would still notice that they still had to go pee. No UTI, it's just that their bodies were producing so much water just by eating this high sodium food. So by switching that, I noticed that dramatically would change, if not go away entirely.
There's some examples of the food.
Yeah, so typically the foods, because it happens with a bunch of foods. Usually like the seafood, not the seafood, but like the ocean formulas, like the fish formulas, tend to be pretty high in sodium. So a lot of times if you look at the dog foods and there's like a fish formula, sometimes they'll have like, kelp. Sometimes they'll even have salt added to them. So if that's the case, that doesn't mean that it's a bad dog food. It just means that maybe you have to give them a little bit less. And maybe you have to control when you give it to them. So instead of, like if I had that food and it was a good brand, I wouldn't necessarily go, this food is bad. What I would go is okay, instead of just feeding him, like free feeding him where he can have access to it 24/7, I'll just give it to him at certain times of the day. You know what I mean? Like he'll eat in the morning, and then maybe he'll eat a little bit more like in the afternoon, but then the afternoon is like the last time he's gonna eat it. That way he's not just eating a big chunk at once, and he's also not eating it throughout the day, and he's also not eating it, right before bedtime. So making adjustments like that, and I find, again, what I've noticed consistently, it's the fish formula dog foods that tend to have that effect on some dogs.
Okay. Makes sense. And like in our particular instance with our special needs dog, especially during those times of year, we really go to try to encourage. We both work from home, so it's a point where it's like, okay, let's take a break, get up from the keyboard, let's go. All right, everybody, potty break. Let's go outside.
Yeah.
And just try to force people out to go.
Yeah.
To try to be preventive. But
Yeah.
this actual winter, I believe we're going to be trying to set a designated area up for those special. Not encourage it, but I mean
For your dog,
for my dog.
for that one, I would say it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, we can tell when
Yeah.
when the shift of the weather comes in. It's,
Oh, yeah.
it kicks in.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know the answer to this question, so that's why you're here. How can I use positive reinforcement effectively to encourage my adult dog to go outside for potty breaks?
Positive reinforcement, that's a good question. It's pretty easy. It makes sense. So how can we, so the key words here are positive reinforcement and adult dog and potty outside,
Yes.
right? How can we use positive reinforcement to encourage an adult dog specifically
An adult dog.
to go outside? Going back to those three things that we talked about: consistency, timing, and motivation. So an adult dog typically will be anywhere from 2.5 years of age, 3 or so, all the way till 7, 8, right, wherever they cross into senior. So an adult dog, it's a lot of years that we're talking about. Also, we're talking about an adult dog. This is a dog that, like we talked about earlier, they have already a list of associations that they've already made. They already know what's pleasant, what's not pleasant. So with a dog like that, I want to encourage him to go outside. How can I make really good associations to partying outside? I just go, okay, what is it that he likes? Does he like food? Good, we're going to use food. Something very pleasant, something that is maybe a little bit more pleasant than kibble. And I'm going to go, hey, when we go outside and you go, as soon as you go, I'm going to tell you good boy or yes, and then I'm going to give you this very pleasant thing.
So
As soon after, like right after you dribble in the last drop.
So Regina doesn't give the treat, but I've noticed she'll be out there and she'll watch every single dog go to the bathroom, and as soon as they're finished, she praises each one.
Yeah.
Consistently, she's out there praising them, and it's like, I swear, one of them gets open, when he lifts his head up with a little smile, like he did something good. But it's like she's constantly doing the praise for them.
Praising is good if the dog considers it rewarding.
Okay.
If the dog finds it pleasant, remember timing, consistency, motivation. So if consistently Regina's like, good job, great, the consistency is there.
And she's got the high-pitched female voice going with that too.
Yeah. So if you have, so the consistency is there, the timing is there. If the praise is good for them, then she's got the timing, consistency, motivation. But if you have a dog that the praise, they could give or take.
Yes.
Doesn't matter that she's got the consistency and the timing. If the motivation is not there, the dog's just going to be like, big deal.
You need to introduce a special reward.
Something pleasant for the dog to go, I really like doing this. Sometimes it's not even food. Sometimes, and I know in your guys' case, you have a bunch of dogs, so you're fostering. But if I was just a person that only has the one dog, and a lot of people walk their dogs, so a lot of people play with their dogs, right? If they have the ability or if their schedule allows for that, and this is part of their routine. One thing that is great, a lot of people don't realize, is save the walk or save the playtime for after the potty break. And that's an instance in which motivation works really great, because a lot of people wait. A lot of people walk the dog, and then during the walk, the dog will pee, right? Or the dog will go pee or poop, and then right after, they'll bring the dog inside. Well, what we want to do instead is to make it very motivating. We go, we're not going anywhere yet until you go pee. Go pee. As soon as you go pee or poop, we go for a walk.
Gotcha.
Or we play. that lets the dog know something pleasant happens right after I go.
I like that association. Next question here is, can you explain the significance of tail wagging and its different meanings?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question actually, because the tail wagging often gets misunderstood. A lot of people believe tail wagging always means the dog is happy,
Got you.
and it's not the case. In a lot of instances, it means that. But there is some sort of hidden meanings behind it as well. So, happiness, right, the way we're describing it and the way the dog expresses it has different tonalities to it, so to speak. There is the frantic, happy, almost anxious, right? So, like if the tail's wagging super, super fast, you're now possibly bordering towards a little bit of frantic, quote unquote, happiness, like almost a little bit too much excitement, right? So, if the tail's really, really fast, and obviously, let's say you see a dog and it sees a cat, and the tail just starts going really, really fast. To me, I look at that and I go, and obviously, I'm generalizing here because I'm using a hypothetical. Well, we don't have a specific dog that we're looking at right now, but in that example, the dog sees a cat, sees a squirrel, etc. Something that makes it really, really excited, right? The tail starts wagging really, really fast. We could say, well, that dog is definitely in a happy state. But this really fast, excessive wagging, super, super fast, when it's zeroing in on a cat or a squirrel, that excitability is going towards the excitability that maybe we don't want.
Okay. I'm following you on that.
Do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Now, if the tail wag is relaxed, so it's not fast, it's not like going super, super fast, but it's relaxed, it has more of a wag, that typically indicates a more relaxed, quote unquote, happiness. This is the tail wag that a dog will normally give when it sees its owner. Now, you can really read into it and go, is it wagging towards the left? Is it wagging towards the right? There are studies that indicate that if the dog wags towards the left, then that means they're excited to see their owners. But again, who's going to look at that, right? Is it your left? Is it my left? You just look at it and go, okay, does it look relaxed?
Right.
If it's a relaxed wag, then that is a calmer happiness, so to speak. If it is, if the dog suddenly looks like its entire body looks tense, right, super, and the tail is wagging, the tail wagging in that instance does not mean, this is a different picture, different context. So the body's stressed, the eyes are big, the body's tense, the tail's wagging really fast. That's not a happy wag. That's more of an anxious wag.
How about when the tail is straight, going just horizontal, back and forth?
So that depends on the tail carriage of the dog too. So you have some dogs, for instance, like a GSP, German Shorthair Pointer, right, or some other pointer type of dog. Their tails are typically pretty stiff. So the stiff tail wag in that particular type of dog doesn't necessarily have any hidden meaning behind it.
Okay.
It might just be one of those that we talked about. But if you have that on a dog that normally doesn't have that tail carriage, that could be an indication of that anxious excitement, or that just that anxiety period that we just talked about a moment ago.
Next question here: how do dogs use vocalizations like barking, whining, or growling to communicate, and what can these sounds indicate?
So how do they use it to communicate? Dogs are really good at telling us, stop doing that with vocalization. That's one that most people pick up on very quickly, which is the growl. Right? So the growl is basically their way of telling you, I gave you body language first. You didn't understand it, which we don't. Normally we don't understand it. So humans in general don't fully grasp dog body language. So they'll give us some body posture, some body language. to tell us, please don't do that. But naturally, we don't understand it, so we just keep going. And then the dog goes, okay, you're not getting it. I'm going to give you some vocalization. When the dog gives you that kind of low, deep growl, that's usually their way of saying, stop right there. Right? And this is when people normally go, oh, you're growling. I don't like that. Right? This is where people normally understand. So this sort of a use of force progression for dogs. First, I'm going to give you my body language, right? First, I'm going to tell you through body language, stop. If you don't get that, then I'm going to give you some vocalization. If you don't get that, I'm going to vocalize more, deeper, and meaner. If you still don't get that, now I'm going to touch you, and I'm going to snap. So it's their use of force ladder. They're telling you, stop. Okay, really mean it. Stop. You're not going to stop. I'm going to bite you. So that's where the vocalization a lot of time comes in. Now, whining, that can mean a number of things. The whining, I've heard dogs whine when they're excited.
Yes.
I've heard dogs whine when they're anxious. Dogs will whine when they're, when they have a lot of anxiety.
I got a dog that'll whine when it yawns.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very common.
Yeah.
Very common.
I can't get it.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's just part of his personality.
Okay, let me rephrase this. If I've got a dog that's hurting and it does a whine, obviously that's a completely different sound.
Yes.
And yes, yeah, I know that there's a problem that needs to be looked
Yeah.
at. Okay, but yeah, whining is a loose-ended one.
Yeah. Some dogs will for sure do that, and some dogs that are vocal, some dogs are naturally more vocal. They'll whine all the time, so they'll vocalize constantly. So your vocal breeds are going to be your German Shepherds are very vocal typically. Huskies are very vocal. Beagles, very vocal. Rottweilers can be very vocal. So these dogs, you're going to hear vocalizing more often and more ranges from, some growling, some deep vocalization to more high-pitched whining.
Gotcha. All right, the million-dollar question here. Does crate training help with potty training?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because what it does is it teaches the dog to hold it. Like they have to hold it. Most dogs are clean animals. They don't like to pee or poop where they're sitting. They'll do whatever they can to not do that. So when you put them in an appropriately sized crate, you're basically telling them, don't pee and poop in there, because they understand that. So if I give them an appropriately sized crate, the last thing this dog wants to do is pee and poop in that space, because they don't want to sit on it, they don't want to lay on it, they don't want to step on it. So they will automatically, because it's in their best interest to hold it. So if I do that, as I'm crate training the dog is by default also holding it. So I give the dog some potty breaks. I'm telling them, okay, you've been holding it for however long. Go outside. Let's go pee and poop. After you're done with that, then you can hang out. Or if you didn't do any of those things, you go back to the crate. Just in case you held it because you were excited and you forgot to go pee and poop, we're going to put you back in the crate because you didn't do that. And then when you go back to the crate, then you'll realize, oh crap, I didn't pee and poop. You're still more inclined to hold it because you're in a space where you don't want to do those things.
Okay.
So that's most dogs.
I found that to be the case for us, as when we came over here, we put the puppy Coco in the crate, and yet to have a accident. Got a comfortable bed in there for it, but
yeah,
it's strictly there for don't tear up my house.
Yeah. So it's great because it does those two things at once.
All right, our last question here. Let's see. How can you handle accidents in the house without discouraging the dog?
So we would say like reprimanding the dog?
Well, I would interpret this question as you got a puppy and it's still having some accidents in the house and you want to lose your temper, but no. How do you... We want to teach the potty training.
Yeah.
We want to get the dog to go outside, but yet it still had an accident in the house, and it did it right in front of you. What would you...
So the best option to do, and again, if we're talking specifically about a young dog,
It's just a young dog.
if it's a young dog, then when it has the accident in the house, immediately grab the dog, grab it, take it outside. And yes, you are gonna probably spill on your way out.
The spillage has already happened.
It's already happened. It's sometimes it's tempting to let him finish it because you're going, just go ahead and finish. We'll deal with that later. But the best option is to go, oh, no, we don't do that. Grab the dog. You don't have to lose your temper. Pick it up. The dog automatically is going to go, whoa, what are you doing? I'm not done yet. Mm-hmm. Well, that automatically adds this layer of, it's uncomfortable, right? When you do that in the house, I'm like, yeah, like you grabbing me and you picking me up.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? And then you take it outside. So the puppy already had a bit of a jolt by the fact that you picked it up. Imagine going and then you get carried as you're still going, right? So that automatically stays in you're automatically take a mental picture of that. So the puppy's going, what are you doing? You're going, oh, we do that outside, buddy, right? That now you're giving the dog an image of when that happens inside, we're going to take you outside anyway. And two, the other thing that you could do is you go, it might have just been an accident, not a big deal. But if you notice that these accidents are consistent, that's when you go, what's happening here? Is it that maybe you have too much access to water? Is it maybe that I'm not managing you enough? You're not getting enough potty breaks? Whatever it is, maybe your crate is too big. Could it be a UTI? You know what I mean? First, I'll look at what could I be doing differently. If I'm doing everything by the book and you're still doing it, my next thing is I'm going to take you to the vet.